Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's a real honor to be here at the conference and to be able to share with you the view of a European infrastructure owner and operator on the Indian LNG market. In 10 to 15 minutes, I'll try to give you a flavor of who FLUXYS is, my employer, why we are currently looking at and even considering investing in LNG infrastructure in India, and I'll finish by giving some examples of projects that we're currently working on. First, a few pages on FLUXYS. FLUXYS today is a owner and operator of infrastructure in Europe, both in transmission and underground storage of natural gas and also LNG terminaling. We're a Belgian company owning the Belgian high-pressure grid and accompanying infrastructure assets such as the LNG terminal in Zeebrugge, but are currently active or have become active since the years 2009 approximately in total 9 European countries. A zoom of where we are active, and I hope this is visible from where you are. Basically, we've spread out over most of northwestern Europe and also southern Europe, grasping the opportunity that has been addressed to us by a number of the other speakers, namely the fact that a lot of the integrated energy companies in Europe were forced by European regulation to step out of the infrastructure part. And that's an important element in the rest of my talk as well, the separation, which is obligatory in Europe, between ownership of the infrastructure assets and the delivery of the molecules in itself. So you see that apart from the big trunk lines, because it's mostly big trunk lines we're active in between the biggest markets between Italy, Germany and the UK, each markets of in between 70 to 80 billion cubic meters of gas per year. We're also active in our own LNG terminal, obviously, in Belgium, and in the one in north of France developed by EDF. Referring to Mrs. Kenderdine's speech, we're also a 90% shareholder in the TAP pipeline, Trans-Adriatic pipeline, bringing Caspian gas, or hoping to bring Caspian gas, as from 2020, towards Europe through Greece, Albania, and then onwards to Italy. Some key aspects about us. First of all, as I said, we're fully independent from any gas producer or supplier. We're just looking at infrastructure, which in most cases makes us an interesting party for project developers wishing to attract a multitude of potential interested suppliers to supply to their facility. We are 78% owned by the Belgian municipalities and 20% by a Canadian pension fund. And both of them are, and that's my second aspect, long-term investors. So we're not there to invest. We're not a financial investors. We're owners and operators, and we're not there to step out in 5 or 10 years' time. I've been at the company now for 13 years, 4 years as head of M&A and business development. We've never sold an infrastructure asset, so the day they ask me to, I'll go back to the books probably to see how to do it exactly. Thirdly, and maybe lastly and importantly as well for this talk, is that we do everything in partnership. So most of the investments we've done in assets throughout Europe today has been done by either together with important gas suppliers or established integrated companies. Some of them are mentioned on the right-hand side. Very quickly over this side, just to say we're a medium-sized company. We have a revenue in 2014 which was just south of €1 billion. We have about 1,200 people in the entities we control, and we are pretty reasonably leveraged, I would say, for a regulated infrastructure company, because coming back to the previous speaker, most of the assets you saw on the previous slides are regulated assets with third-party access. Why would a company as FLUXYS look at the Indian LNG market? First of all, because our shareholders do want to grow the company further. And if they want to grow the company further, first of all, we look at projects that have the commercial rationale, where market fundamentals are there and the market is there. And then I come to the picture shown on the slide that show on the left-hand side the evolution of forecasts by the International Energy Agency in terms of demand for Europe. And in only 4 years' time, you can see the let's say, drastic reduction in forecasted demand. Okay, our own production is declining, so there will be an increased need for imports, but still prospects aren't anymore what they were in 2011. If we look at the Indian prospects, it's clear that, from the same source by the way, it's clear that they are still there. There has been some delay, but increased demand is still expected, and we believe there is a fundamental growth which will happen in the Indian LNG market over time. As I said, macroeconomically and looking at market fundamentals, all the, let's say, conditions from an outside-in perspective seem to be there. First of all, massive population growth, economic prosperity, and thus an increasing energy consumption per capita. According again to the same source, 2015, there's an expected growth rate for gas in India, which is expected to be 4.6%, only second to China's 4.7%. And also in absolute terms, it's expected that the gas consumption will increase substantially from 50 to 60 BCM to about 175 by 2040. Obviously, demand is not everything. You need to look at the supply situation of the country as well. And to some extent, or to a large extent, India is very lucky to have its own domestic natural gas resources. But for various reasons, a production gap currently exists. Investing in additional infrastructure for LNG deliveries will allow to close that gap, but also to diversify the sources of delivery to the market and increase its security of supply, we believe. When looking at the prospects for gas in India, one can't ignore a topic which was already touched upon by other speakers, is the gas price evolution. So I've shown here the price curve in Japan, Europe, and US over time, and we see a clear downward evolution and convergence of the pricing over time in the last 2 years, let's say. Those have been driven down by the interplay between international supply and demand. But some important elements we believe to consider are, and that has been mentioned by other speakers, the massive amount of LNG that will come online in 2016 and onwards up to 2020. European demand being flat, Japanese nuclear production coming back online, China's imports having dropped a few percentages, interestingly enough, in 2015. So decreased demand also in the countries around, on this part of the world, around India. So we believe that this will further drive down the gas prices, the LNG import prices that Indian importers will need to pay. And I'm, of course, looking at this from an import perspective, not from a domestic supplier perspective. But we believe that these elements might potentially provide the perfect cocktail for India to really capture LNG as one of their important fuels going forward.
May I just interrupt you here? Specifically, what would be your area of interest in India? To set up LNG terminal or to participate in LNG supply, or what would be? Or to participate in a pipeline infrastructure?
What we are looking at as an infrastructure company is mainly to invest in LNG import facilities. Why?
LNG because import means a vessel?
Regasification facility.
A regasification terminal or Correct. A vessel importing vessel?
No, regasification terminal.
Terminal, okay.
Correct.
Good.
Why? Because we believe that, first of all, the footprint of such a facility is pretty limited. So in terms of safety and security perspective, you have a pretty good oversight of the project.
There are quite a few proposals which are in offing, and some are, 10%, 20% or something like that. So have you been...
Absolutely. We have talked to some of the developers. And there are early talks, I must admit, that are early talks.
You're most welcome, because, there are a number of parties which are showing interest. So you're most welcome.
Yeah. So thank you for that. That is indeed where we believe we can add value, and I might skip some of the slides that overlap. Where we can add value, we believe, is the fact that we would come with a model that is based on the model we've applied earlier in France, in Dunkirk, where we come as a minority partner. For us, what is extremely important is having a local partner.
I would suggest to the organizers to arrange your meetings with the specific companies which are already taking steps in this direction.
Yep.
So that your proposal can really take shape during your current visit itself.
Do you allow me for
Please,
a couple more minutes? Maybe some observations
Please,
where we're struggling with in our, struggling with is maybe a big word, but in our assessment is, first of all, although language certainly is not a barrier, political stability is not a barrier, I would say in general economic prosperity and growth developments is not a barrier. What we see, and it's typically a metric we look at, is when you look at the World Bank's ease of doing business, which is, I would say, a general ranking of the different countries over the world for 10 subcategories, we remark as a third economy worldwide that India is only ranked number 130 in the world. It's improving, but not with big steps. And just specifically, they have for three of the 10 sub-criteria, they're in the top 100. But for two of them, which are extremely important for infrastructure investors, being getting your permits and enforcing your contracts, they rank amongst the 15 lowest performing countries worldwide, which is not matching with its current status, we believe. So that's certainly, for ourselves and for our investors, something to overcome. Maybe just, if you allow me, 2 more minutes on the LNG Zeebrugge.
One more speaker and then questions.
Yeah, I'll hurry up. The LNG terminal in Zeebrugge has been there, commissioned in '87, extended in 2007. We have a long-standing relationship with Qatar, with Sonatrach as well. It delivers about 80% Qatar today of the long-term capacity. We have 4 tanks being there and a throughput of about 9 billion cubic meters a year. What is interesting is this, and I didn't see this on the previous slide, I just wanted to highlight this to show what business cases worldwide in LNG can be viable, and that is the Yamal case. Yamal is a Siberian producer of LNG. It's a GV of Novatek, an independent Russian supplier, of Total and Chinese CNPC. And they will produce LNG as from 18 onwards, I believe, and they've sold their LNG in Southeast Asia. And to do so, they'll deliver by ship, obviously, and during Arctic summer, they can go the eastern route. They've purchased and they're constructing nuclear-fueled special icebreaker LNG ships, and they can break the ice layer during Arctic summer, but they can't during Arctic winter. The ice is too thick. So they were looking for a terminal in northwestern Europe to transship into traditional LNG ships. We won that 20-year contract, but that shows that even sailing, I would say, around the world today allows to import LNG at competitive costs in Southeast Asia. So that is the reason why we're currently constructing a 5th LNG tank there, because we were able to convince them to choose Zeebrugge. So that will add another 214 ship movements per year to our terminal. I'll conclude by this. The slides will be circulated. There's other interesting stuff in there, but
Thank you.